Hi, and thanks for joining me tonight in episode 1 in Introduction to Watercolour. Tonight we're going to be talking about everything to do with paints. So that means, 37mm tubes, it means 14mm tubes, and it means even some 5mm tubes. We're going to be talking about even some hard pans, and we're going to be talking about mostly Winsor Newton watercolours, but we're also going to put them to the test against some Cotman and some Reeves that I just picked up today. So we're going to be having a look at all of those things. So stay here with me as we get stuck into that. Thank you. I'm talking about watercolours, and the ones that I mostly use are the Winsor Newton Artist quality watercolours. So that's what I'm very familiar with, and that's what we're going to be talking about, but we're also going to be looking at Cotman, and also I've got some Reeves here, and that I just picked up tonight. So we'll have a bit of a look at those, we'll unbox those and see what they're like tonight too. And I also purchased just a $12 round sable, as opposed to my pure Kolinsky sable that I have here, which costs a couple of $100. So we're going to see how we go using this round sable and checking against these colours here, which are colours that I really use a lot, which is cobalt blue, light red and yellow ochre. And over the next 10 lessons, these are the colours that we're going to be using, these 3 colours. And if you see here, this is generally how I work when I work in watercolour. I work with bowls of wash. In fact, if you wanted to have a look at how I do normally work, it's bowls more of this sort of size, which is very large bowls with a lot of paint in there. But of course, when we're starting, we don't need to go down this path. The reason why I keep my paints in these large bowls is because when I'm using some large brushes, so if you have a look at some of these brushes here, these are hake brushes, and when you're painting on a large format, then really you want to be using some large brushes, and so you need a large bowl to be able to dip those brushes into. So that's why I generally keep, especially the paints that I use often, I keep them in these nice big bowls. So that one's there's cerulean blue, and that one there is a mix of Winsor blue and red shade and light red, and this one here is a beautiful mix of cobalt blue and light red, one of my favourite colours. But we'll get onto those later on. When you're purchasing paints, you can get them in 5mm tubes. This is Winsor Newton Artist quality. You can get them in 5mm tubes, 14mm tubes and 37mm tubes. And just tonight, for instance, actually it wasn't any cheaper for me to have bought from my local art store these 37mm tubes over these 14mm tubes. So just have a look and work out how much it's going to cost you per mil, and then you can work out what to buy. But generally the 5mm tubes are definitely more expensive per mil than the 14 and the 37, and really there's not a lot of watercolour in there. So generally I would advise, unless you're just testing a colour for the new time, to get 14mm tubes. It's a good size, and if there are colours that you use a lot, then by all means go and get some 37mm tubes. They're not all available in 37mm tubes. There's only certain colours available in 37mm tubes. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. And the other way that you can get watercolours is obviously in hard pans. I don't generally use these, but they are great for travel. So if you have a look here, this is a great little travel set that I've used over many years. And this is a great little travel set, and actually what goes well is if you're traveling is you can use a brush like this. This is still a round sable. It's a beautiful quality brush, but it has a handle that comes off, and you probably want to wet it a bit and make sure that when you're putting it, it's very old now, so it's become a bit splayed, but that can go in there like that and then close up like that, and makes it and it's got a little breathing hole in here so that the brush won't go mouldy. So that is a beautiful travel brush that could go with these quite well. And it's a decent sized brush, because half the time a travel brush is so small, it's really hard to lay down washes in any meaningful way, especially the way I like to paint. So that's a great brush. All of the things that I show here tonight will be in the description below. There will be links to all of these things, or as many things as I can possibly find on the internet. So it's good to know that what is going to be the difference if you go to buy some watercolours and you're going to get cobalt blue in the Winsor Newton Cotman versus cobalt blue in the Artist quality, what is going to be the difference? Well, the difference is generally that in the cobalt blue Artist quality, obviously you're going to pay a lot more. Tonight when I bought these were about $8 for about 8 mils, and this was about $36 or $37 for 14 mils, so about twice the price really. So if you're buying Artist quality, what you're going to get is the pigment or the ground plus some gum arabic and really nothing much else. Whereas in these student quality watercolours, they're going to put a lot more things in there to fill it out, a bit less pigment, but we'll see how it behaves on the page versus the Artist quality versus the student quality. And we've even got these reeves here, which we will open up. And unfortunately they don't have cobalt blue, but they do have yellow ochre. And we could even try a burnt umber, because I know I've got that in Artist quality over here somewhere, so we could even try that. So when mixing paints, really what you want to do is to squeeze a good amount out into the bowl. And you could use some bowls like these, and these are very, very cheap from a local $2 store or a Chinese store. They sell a lot of those sorts of bowls, so they're very, very easy to pick up, and they're nice and white. I would never use coloured bowls because it doesn't give you a true indication of the colour. And I would never use too wobbly a bowl, so that what it has to do is it has to be stable when you're painting so that it doesn't tip over. So again, that's what I would do. In terms of paint, what I would suggest you do at the start is not go out and buy 30 colours. I would say, so the next 10 lessons, we're going to do the next 10 lessons with these 3 colours. So we're going to use cobalt blue, light red and yellow ochre. We're going to do some mixes with those, but you can paint a lot of beautiful paintings with 3 colours. And that's what I would suggest you do at the beginning, is use less colours so that you just get used to techniques. In fact, right at the beginning, probably one of the best things you could do is to just work monochromatically, just with one colour and do that. And a lot of our exercises initially will be done in one colour. So let's have a look at this. Let's get this was our $12 round synthetic sable. When you first buy a brush, often it's very solid, and obviously you're going to want to soften it in water. And we'll do another episode on brushes next, so I won't go into details about brushes. And again, we'll go into details about how to paint in future videos. What we're going to do here tonight is just have a bit of a look at these colours, and this is new for me too, because actually I've never used anything other than Winsor Newton Artist quality watercolour. So this is actually very new for me, and it'll be interesting to see what happens when we do this. So I've got my yellow ochre bowl there of artist quality. We've got yellow ochre Cotman, and then this Reeves yellow ochre here. And what I'm going to do is I might just move this a little bit this way so that we can see. And what I'll do is I'll just squeeze a little bit onto my desk here. This desk acts for me as a palette. And then we can see here, we'll just do a little bit of painting with that. But the first thing I need to do is just, this watercolour here has just sat for a while, so I just need to charge that. And my water bottles keep getting used by my children, and so they leak, which is not great. So let's just grab this other one. I'll take that off there for a second. I need to get some more spray bottles, and of course when mixing paint we want to use just a hog's hair brush. Can you guys see that? No. Alright, here we go. So this is going to mix up very easily because it's only just been sitting since last night. If this had sat for a long time, then it would be much, much harder to mix up and take quite some time. And what you would be best off doing, so if it was this one here that you can see here, if this is what I was mixing up right now, then I would put water in and I would just let it sit there for a number of hours. Because this is just like, you know, farmland in Australia that hasn't had water for a long time. It's dry, it's cracked, it's caked. And really, if you wanted that to be able to take water, you really need to put water in there and let it just sit on top, and it'll very, very slowly soak in. And some watercolours take longer than others, like cerulean blue takes a long time to soak up the water, whereas cobalt blue much quicker. So you just get used to, after a while, the different pigments and their different behaviours, and of course that would probably vary brand to brand. So we've got our yellow ochre one there. We're going to, I'll just move that a bit further across so we can see a bit more. We'll get some Cotman yellow ochre here. This will be very interesting. And we'll get a bit of some Reeves yellow ochre. Interesting. And I'll use this I'll use this cheap round sable to see how it behaves, even though it'll be a bit strange for me. So what I might do is I might just put this off to the side as well, and what we'll do is we'll just start up the top. We'll there's a little drip there. We'll start up the top, and then I'll just gradually fade that out. So we'll just do a bit here of this, make sure it's a nice strong wash, yeah. And then what we can do with that is just take that out, and we'll let gravity, we're tilting the page so that it helps with that transition of colour across. Alright, so that was the Artist Quality yellow ochre just there, and we'll do the Cotman now, the Cotman one. Let's see how that goes. We'll just put a bit of that across there, and then we'll rinse it out a little bit. Yeah, interesting. I'll just soak that up a bit. And of course I'm using my round synthetic sable. It obviously behaves slightly different, this brush, than my other one. But you know, on the whole, very interesting. And let's get this Reeves one now. We'll put that across there. Rinse it out a little bit. And I suppose this is just a test of what the colour is like. Let's just do a third one here of just so I can get a little bit more graduation of colour here, which I didn't get in the first one. So in terms of yellow ochre, the difference that I can see is that slightly different in its behaviour on the page and its movement on the paper, which you might want it to be able to move more easily, more freely. It sort of slips down the page a lot more than the Artist Quality. The Artist Quality has a slightly different stain. These two are very similar, the Cotman and the Reeves, very similar in terms of their colour and their stain and their behaviour on the page. But on the whole, it's not a terrible colour, and that is a great thing, because sometimes you get student quality watercolours and they're very, very different than the in terms of student versus. Let's turn this page this way for a second so you can see that. So let's see now. This is the cobalt blue Artist Quality. Using my $12 synthetic sable brush, which is interesting for me for the first time, but you don't want that going into the yellow ochre, so we'll just keep that separate. So that's the Artist Quality one. Let's just check out the Cotman. You can see each time I'll just put this here so it just stays at that angle for a bit. tip that over. So you can see that they're quite different colours. The cobalt blue artist quality is a really strong blue. The Cotman is lighter, and it also does behave differently on the page. Each time in the student quality watercolours, it seemed to just flow down the page. I had a little bit less control over the graduation of the colour. But really, if you're starting out and you don't have a lot of spare money, then I would definitely use these Cotmans. I think that's they're half the price. And let's be honest, watercolours cost a fortune. Whenever I go and buy some watercolours, I am always astounded by how much you end up having to spend, and it blows me away. And I'm lucky that I sell originals for reasonable prices, because otherwise it would be very difficult to justify the continued expense of watercolours. So that's my take on those colours, is that actually, by all means, use some Cotman, the Reeves in yellow ochre, and I'll use these a little bit more over the coming weeks. I also got some cheaper paper that we'll check out over the coming weeks. This is Reeves paper. It's a bit cheaper. It's about a third of the price compared to the arches that I use, so we'll have a look at that over the coming weeks. So hopefully this has been helpful for you in gaining an understanding of paints, how to mix them, what's inside the tube, what you're paying for when you get student versus artist quality, hard pans versus tubes, and really remember, by all means, you can use these hard pans, that they are most of the time they're a slightly more cost effective way of painting in watercolours. But the thing that is difficult with them at times is to get a really strong wash. You can, of course, but it just takes a bit more work. And if you start working larger scale, then it's going to be harder to go about doing that. So that's why I generally work with tubes, because I paint on a large scale. And another thing that's worth remembering about watercolours is that it's just the pigment with the gum arabic. So as you water it down, the more watered down it becomes, the more of a suspension it becomes, with more water and less particles of pigment, which means it's more likely to behave in a different way the more you water it down. The worst thing you could possibly do with a watercolour is to just paint using it straight out of the tube and not water it down at all, and use it more like an acrylic or an oil. So it's definitely worth using watercolour in a way that it's really difficult to use those other mediums in. So like with these hard palettes here, if I haven't used them for a fair while, the thing you have to do with a watercolour is moisten it. So you could just come along and spray, which I won't do with that one because it doesn't work. You would spray these just on the surface, just to wet them and let that sit for a bit. That's what you would do with them. And the same again with these. If you let your bowls of wash dry out like this one is here, then you would come along with a spray bottle and I would spray into there. And again, you depending on how much pigment is in there as to how much water you would put in. But the worst thing you want to do is to put in too much water, but you just want enough to just cover the surface really, and then let that sit there. Let that sit there like that. No, let that sit there like that. And that will gradually soak in to the pigment and then be a usable thing. The way I store my watercolours is in a map drawer. So if we have a look down here, this is where I store all my paints. Keeps all the dust out, keeps them nice and secure, and they fit in there. And then when I finish, they go back away. That's where I keep paper and finished paintings. And same, so it's just a fantastic storage area for paints and paper, which is just fantastic. Lastly, some of these might be a little bit difficult to see, but I'll see if it can... So if you have a look at this, this is a bowl of burnt umber. And don't be worried, if some paints do behave like this. So some paints, really when they dry, they crack and they just look really terrible. But this is totally fine, and I can wet this and mix it back in and it'll be totally fine. So burnt umber, raw umber does it not to the quite same extent, but burnt umber definitely does this, and all pigments behave slightly differently. So don't be worried if any of your pigments end up doing that in a bowl. They're not ruined, they're not stuffed. You just need to put water in there, let it sit there, and then it'll be good to go. And you'll just have to use a nice hogs hair bristle brush and really work hard for a fair while, or let the water sit in it for a very long time. The other thing is, of course, you can buy these hard pans like that, and again, I don't really use them at all. That's why they've sat around for a very long time. Alright, so thanks for joining me and learning about paints tonight. The next episode we're going to be covering brushes and then paper, and then we're going to be moving on to exploring how to paint simple landscapes and building up in complexity after that. So if there's anything that in particular that you're interested in, then you can skip forward to the future episodes and that's fine. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you found this interesting. If you liked it, then press the thumbs up button, and if you would like to be informed of when I produce a new episode, then press the subscribe button, and if you would like to know when I've done another one, then press the bell button. It'll let you know that I've done another one. So thanks very much for tuning in tonight, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.